Zulfi Bhutto of Pakistan, His Life and Times by Stanley Wolpert. Chapter 8, Free Elections and the Birth of Bangladesh, 1970 to 1971. We are the people of Pakistan, Zulfi shouted, launching his party's first national election campaign in Karachi on the eve of his 42nd birthday, 4th January 1970. The people are my roundtable conference. The round table of Ayub Khan comprised only a few individuals who were conspiring against the people, shutting themselves up in rooms. This is why we did not join the round table conference. Our politics is the politics of the masses. It is politics of the open. The round table conference was a deep conspiracy against the people. Ayub Khan wanted to sabotage the people's struggle. He did not want to surrender power. The capitalists, the feudalists, the army, and the police were supporting him, but the people were not supporting him. Might it still have been possible in those final hours of Ayub Khan's administration to fashion some political formula for saving Pakistan from the violent disintegration that would sever the two wings in 1971? Had Zulfi agreed to attend the roundtable conference, was there any reason to believe that he and Mujib could sit patiently listening to one another? In which language? For how long? The catalogue of Bengali grievances condensed into the Awami League's 6 points, after all, is too well known to require repetition. The majority of Pakistan's population, who lived in the overcrowded East Wing, felt not only exploited economically by the West, but oppressed politically and militarily, much the way most South Asians had felt under the British imperial rule. The patriotic West Pakistanis, such feelings to them were incomprehensible or betrayed deep-rooted treachery that could never be accepted. Zulfi Bhutto, patriotic West Pakistani that he was, viewed Mujibur Rahman and most of his Bengali followers as little better than traitors to the land of the pure, for which Quaid-e-Azam Jinnah and his own father, Sir Shah Nawaz, had lived and died. Like Yahya Khan, he was willing to give them more posts in the higher services, even in the army, and a more equitable share of the foreign exchange that their jute exports earned the world over. He had no objection, moreover, to their speaking, reading, and taking civil service examinations in Bengali. But what more did they want? Were they Pakistani Muslims or were they traitors? How much autonomy could any single region expect and demand before that region became an independent nation? As a good Sindhi, Zulfi well understood the powerful tug of regional roots, yet Sindh was a part of Pakistan, as was East Bengal, and Punjab and the frontier. All of them combined made Pakistan what it was, a great Muslim nation, much more than the sum of its provincial parts. As for Ayub, how could Zulfi sit at any table over which that old fool or fox might preside? No, the round table conference, called by Ayub, was a deep conspiracy against the people, Bhutto believed. Time has shown that our decision was in the interest of the people. Zulfi continued in his election campaign kick-off at Nishtar Park. If we had joined the roundtable conference, the movement would have failed. Ayub Khan would not have decided to hold elections. Nothing could be gained, neither elections nor the decision on adult franchise. He had only conceded the parliamentary system, and the other leaders wanted that I should call off the movement. He was a hunter, but I am a better hunter. He could trap others but failed to trap Zulfikar Ali. I escaped the trap because I did not want the people to be trapped. I shall always remain with the people. The round table would, of course, have demanded national elections a few months earlier perhaps, and the franchise monopoly long enjoyed by Ayub's basic Democrats would have been scrapped because the universal adult franchise demand was one agreed upon by all major parties, East and West. Zulfi may, however, have been right in so proudly asserting that he was a better hunter than Ayub. He had, after all, done much with his verbal shots to bring down the field marshal he had supported and shored up those 8 long ministerial years before. Now he continued to attack the following dictator, insisting that there was a time when Ayub Khan told me that if we could defend East Pakistan, our armies could break through to Delhi. He repeated this many times. He told me that this was the only hitch in the way, otherwise, we could launch a struggle for Kashmir. Later, when we went to Washington, Mr. Robert McNamara talked to me at a dinner in our embassy and asked me how we would defend East Pakistan in case of a war with India. He admitted that we could advance in the west. I told him that if East Pakistan could be defended, then perhaps we could face India. He refused to believe that. Zulfi was now ready to reveal all the secrets he knew about Ayub's fears and weaknesses, appreciating how much Pirzada, if not Yahya, would relish such anecdotes. He had, of course, often told these stories at private parties with his brilliant mimicry of Ayub and the others, but now he was speaking to the people as their self appointed tribune. I will not contest the elections on trifles. I had told Ayub Khan that the defense of East Pakistan was not difficult. Everybody knows that our valiant forces did teach India a lesson in the run of Kuch. Ayub Khan thought I was sentimental. I told him that I was not sentimental and that he should allow me to carry out my policy. But he accepted a ceasefire and took the matter to the International Court of Justice. He declared that he was a friend of India. The result was that we lost territory which rightly belonged to us. Zulfi believed that, as did most of the Pakistanis who heard his hoarse but powerful voice. Like him, they wanted it to be true, wished it were true, that Pakistan's smaller army could beat an Indian army no matter how large and well equipped. One Muslim Pakistani soldier with a rifle and bare bayonet was worth at least 10 Hindu Indian soldiers. Most of them were convinced. Was it not true? Our military commanders had requested 2 divisions. Zulfi revealed, spilling secrets. Since the 1965 war, many of his listeners were less positive that religion and national origin alone created super soldiers. Maybe numbers played a small part. Now Zulfi was explaining to them why the numbers had been denied and the victory march into Delhi aborted before it began. Our finance minister had enough money for industries but refused to allocate funds for the raising of 2 divisions demanded by the army. Later, even Ayub opposed the move. If the 2 divisions had been raised, the situation would have been different today. Zulfi returned to Larkana for his annual hunt and birthday celebrations, but was angered and dismayed to be facing some of the same old petty problems in his home district, where Ayub Khohro was set to run against him in one of 3 Sindhi constituencies. Zulfi would successfully contest that year. Even though a new impartial superintendent of police had been assigned to Larkana, Zulfi felt obliged to write him on 10th January concerning a call by an inspector in connection with an alleged case of cattle theft. He suspected some hidden malice and meanness. It was part of a conspiracy instigated by my petty and inconsequential political opponents. Siyasat. To an immense audience that filled Pindi's Liaquat Gardens a week later, Zulfi spoke of religion. Islam is our religion. We are Muslims and we are proud of that. You know that I have not only served Pakistan but I have also served Islam in the Middle East. Allah will decide on Judgment Day how best I have served the cause of Islam. Our second principle is democracy. In a democracy, the people rule. We insist on democracy, for it is provided in Islam, and socio-economic equality or masawat has been given the highest priority. We shall therefore bring about masawat. No power on earth can stop us. Zulfi's fervor turned his campaign appearances into old time religious revival meetings, where those who watched him and heard his invocations of the Prophet's name wept as they cheered and screamed, some fainting from the ecstasy of being in his presence. We have no hidden personal motives in our struggle for Masawat. Zulfi answered his free enterprise critics. We are working for the good of the people at large. If countries like Iran and Egypt can introduce free education and medical care, why should a great Islamic country like Pakistan not be able to do so? Why can't the people educate their children? Why can't the sick get admissions into hospitals? Is it because the 22 families are in possession of the country's wealth? Ayub's family was one of that cohort, named by Dr. Mehbubul Haq, the former chief economist of the Planning Commission, in his economic analysis of Pakistan's ills. Zulfi told the crowd that the people had been fed on false promises for the last 22 years, insisting there is an end to patience. One part of Zulfi Bhutto believed his humane words. The poor people who listened also believed them, and many thought that by voting for this good and devout man, their poverty would soon end and the gross inequities of the economy would disappear. Zulfi promised that the introduction of Islamic socialism to Pakistan would do away with the myriad prevalent disparities. I am prepared to sacrifice everything, even the lives of my children. I am not afraid of being killed, Zulfi shouted, breaking open his shirt. Come on, fire bullets at me. I am prepared to die for the sake of the people. Such histrionics dazzled the West Pakistanis crowded round him. Zulfi Bhutto never feared death. A martyr's death, after all, would assure him an eternity in heaven. The slings and arrows of police officers and rival vaderos bothered him more than the prospect of a hero's death in the service of his people, more and more of whom virtually worshipped him for saying aloud that many of them felt, yet lacked the courage or ability to articulate. Then, on the subject of Kashmir, Zulfi ridiculed Ayub's cowardly leadership. India pulled out all her troops from the occupied Kashmir to counter the Chinese attack in November 1962, Zulfi revealed. Ayub Khan was busy sightseeing in Hunza, riding a mule. Kashmir had no troops at all. Any action by Pakistan would have ended the Kashmir issue forever. In conformity with justice, we lost a golden opportunity. From Pindi, Zulfi drove to Peshawar, where he addressed a mammoth meeting in Jinnah Park. He mocked the fallen Ayub, who had been shot at in Peshawar 2 years earlier, when he rose to speak there just a few days after Zulfi had launched his new party's crusade against the dictator. When the shots rang out, our great field marshal fell flat on the ground and took cover. My dear friends, I believe that life and death are in the hands of God. But I can assure you that if Bhutto had been involved in such an incident, he would never have fallen flat on the ground. The frontier audience cheered wildly, some firing guns into the air, for here was a man worthy of leading this nation of tribal braves. Despite his Sindhi birth, Zulfi Bhutto spoke like a true Pathan. He contemptuously ignored his Western political opponents, landlords like Punjab's Mia Mumtaz Doltana, who led the Council Muslim League during his campaign, and warriors like former Air Marshal Muhammad Asghar Khan of the frontier, who had recently joined the political fray, called for an early restoration of democracy to Pakistan. Everyone is posing as a lion, Zulfi roared, dismissing such political opponents as jackals. Now they claim that they fought for democracy. Some of them were sitting in England and others had locked themselves in their houses. The people fought against Ayub Khan and I was with them all through the struggle. Bhutto Zindabad echoed from thousands of lusty lungs across the Khyber toward the Afghan border. Multitudes came from every remote village of West Pakistan to hear him. For Zulfi Bhutto was fast becoming a legend in a land where courage and self-sacrifice are weighed against the purest gold in the hearts of Muslim men and their begums. Zulfi's passionate, hypnotic powers affected women as well as men. Few West Pakistanis were immune to his charm and messianic appeal. At Mardan, a month later, Zulfi promised his followers, I shall always side with you and die with you. Zulfikar Ali Bhutto will be with you at every step, at every turn, and on every front. At Gujarat in March, Zulfi shouted, This is not my party, this is your party. Wherever he stopped to speak on a campaign trail, despite the heat and dust, which fatigued many of those who accompanied him, Zulfi seemed to thrive, growing stronger on sleepless days and weeks from the adulation the masses, his people, bright-eyed though barefoot, smiling and waving though often unwashed, were devoted to him, for was he not their new savior? Bread and butter issues were not neglected by the energetic candidate, who reminded his listeners that articles of daily use like milk, meat, salt, and clothes are becoming dearer, but there is no corresponding increase in the income of the poor people. The capitalists and the mill owners are making a lot of money. Why are the workers in jail? Why are not the feudal lords and capitalists in jails, in spite of indulging in smuggling and black marketeering? Zulfi's cry was roti kapda or makan, bread, cloth, and shelter. It soon became the perennial slogan of his People's Party, for those basic needs would remain unsatisfied after each interlude of his party's rule. One part of Zulfi believed his campaign slogans and promises, but another, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, understood and appreciated all the temptations and pitfalls of administrative power. He had worked closely with Ayub for 8 years and with Mirza before him. Hence, who knew better than this Bhutto, after all, the pleasures of cosmopolitan high life? His silk suits were all handmade, his Havana cigars hand-rolled, his Scotch whisky the oldest and best. Part of him hated the others for enjoying it all as much as he did. So, out on the hustings, facing the barren rocks and dust-filled fields of the frontier, and ill-fed, underclothed, homeless masses who turned out in their tens of thousands to hear his words of hope and cheer his promises, Zulfi meant what he said, even though his brain knew how impossible it would be to keep any of his grandiose promises. Again, the largest crowd gathered at Lahore's Mochi Gate to hear Zulfi attack Ayub's weaknesses, explaining how the Kashmir War of 1965 would have been won had he been in charge. When Indian forces were busy committing aggression against Pakistan, Ayub Khan was playing golf in Sawat. My friends and brothers, our brave forces were ready to advance. General Yahya Khan, Air Marshal Noor Khan, and the present Pakistan Air Force Chief, Air Marshal Rahim, all of them wanted to teach India a lesson. But Musa Khan and Ayub Khan were frightened. And right at the time I was saying at the Security Council that we would fight for 1,000 years. The crowd went wild. Zulfi Bhutto was their hero, a military strategist, a diplomatic genius, an unmatched orator. Ayub, who was twice his size, clearly had less than half his courage or brains. After the war, Ayub Khan went to Washington and met with President Johnson, who frightened him, threatened him, and forced him to his knees. I was pained to see the president of a brave nation being so easily browbeaten, extremely pained. On 30th March, Zulfi and his party left Shahdadpur after breakfast for Sanghar, Pir Pagaro's Hur territory, where bright triumphal arches decked in the colors of the People's Party were being erected a few days earlier but hacked down with hatchets the night before. District officers and the police joined the procession of cars just a few miles out of Sanghar. The local police had word of an ambush and urged him to stop at the government rest house en route. He accepted the cautionary invitation, but before the cars reached the rest house, they opened up and a regular battle ensued with guns and rifles. Our opponents were occupying bunkers and were sitting in trees with their rifles, Zulfi reported after reaching Karachi. I was in a motor car, but I came out because I wanted to face death bravely. I started walking forward and told my opponents I was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto and they could shoot me. Then they started firing again. My friends fell upon me and I had a narrow escape. In describing his experience 12 days later to a crowd in Karachi's Liari district, the heartland of Pakistan People's Party support, Zulfi boldly proclaimed, "Whatever the conspiracies against me, whatever the plans against me, we are not going to be scarred off. The whole Pakistan has been turned into a sanghar. Whatever the number of murder threats or murder attempts, we shall continue to fight them with the help of the people. This is my solemn promise to you." The Sindhi assemblage roared out in one voice, G.A. Bhutto. The Pakistan People's Party is the party of the masses. It is your party and it represents your feelings. The people of Pakistan from Karachi to Khyber support the Pakistan People's Party because this party belongs to the common man. If one Bhutto is assassinated, 1,000 Bhuttos will arise. If I am killed, the people of Pakistan will carry on this democratic struggle. Even Zulfi did not dare to lay any claim, however, to the support of East Pakistan's people, who constituted the majority of enfranchised voters in the nation as a whole. Mujib daily addressed much larger crowds, and they in millions cried, "Joy Bangla! Victory to Bengal!" Mujib's popularity throughout the East was far greater than Zulfi's in the West, for there were 10 million more people in the East and all of them spoke and understood Bengali. And Mujib was as stirring an orator in Bengali as Zulfi was in Sindhi, English or Urdu. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman unleashed hatred against West Pakistan. Zulfi later declared in his pamphlet, The Great Tragedy. He used every means to mobilize the people of the East Pakistan. Riding on his high crest of Bengali nationalism and with a number of jail terms to his credit, the Bengali leader raised the emotions of his people to a frenzied pitch. He went about like a messiah, telling the poverty-stricken people of East Pakistan that their salvation lay in 6 points. He cleverly concealed his true intentions in an atmosphere of hatred. The language and the methods were of fascists. Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was a spellbinding orator. He used his political skill with a mastery that no Bengali leader to this day has rivaled or surpassed. Given the provincial and linguistic fragmentation of the West and the large number of opposing parties, Zulfi knew that he had no chance of beating Mujib in a nationwide universal franchise election. He had, however, powerful allies in Yahya and Pirzada, who, like him, feared Mujib's secessionist plan. But as Soharwardi's leading disciple, Mujib was clever enough to understand the forces allied in the West Pakistan against him. Since his release from prison, he had appeared singularly flexible, even accepting Ayub's invitation to the Round Table Conference, which Zulfi had rejected. And Yahya had promised to be an impartial referee in policing the elections. So Mujib had good reason to hope that he would peacefully emerge as Pakistan's next premier, especially if he were willing to permit the little general to remain Pakistan's nominal president. Such an arrangement was anathema to Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Bhutto saw Yahya socially as well as officially during this pre-election period, for Yahya Khan was Shia by faith. His ancestors were Iranian born. Zulfi attended Yahya's daughter's gala wedding in April and drank every toast to the beautiful bride's health, as did his father, who convivially told Bhutto, "You fellows must now take over. But Zulfi knew that by fellows he meant all contending politicians and was wary of Yahya's seeming generosity and apparent willingness to relinquish power. In announcing elections the past November, Yahya had insisted that they be held within a legal framework order, whose final definition he had issued at the end of March. It required adherence to certain basic principles by all parties: faith in Islamic ideology, adherence to the integrity of Pakistan, to the holding of free and fair elections, and to the enjoyment of provincial autonomy within a centrally integrated federal system, and the promising of equitable economic progress for all provinces. Zulfi suspected and feared collusion between Yahya and Mujib, and between Yahya and the fundamentalist Islamic parties of the West. Let us hope that the electoral race will be impartially supervised and that the same set of rules will apply to all. On 4th April 1970, Yahya flew to Dhaka to meet with Mujib and his advisers as well as with other Bengali political leaders. He was certain that the overwhelming majority of Bengali leaders had accepted his LFO without major reservations. Mujib, like Bhutto, had a more complex mind than the general, who was soon shocked to learn from tapes played for him by his intelligence officers that Mujib had confided to his closest colleagues. My aim is to establish Bangladesh. I will tear the LFO into pieces as soon as the elections are over. Who could challenge me once the elections are over? Zulfi doubtless understood Mujib much better than Yahya did, which is to say that he never trusted his populist counterpart of the East, rarely believing anything Mujib said. Zulfi knew that, like Zulfi himself, Mujib felt constrained to say one thing one day to the audience and often its opposite the next time he spoke. Politics, after all, was the art of compromise, was it not? Zulfi understood, of course, as he admitted in a speech given that April, that a constitution will be framed, but the constitution alone will not solve your problems. Elections will also be conducted, but they alone cannot serve all purposes. Elections have been held in our neighboring country, but the plight of the people in that country remains as deplorable as here, because they also have a capitalist system. Dr. Mubashir was Zulfi's economic advisor at this time, and he needed a scapegoat that the poor could blame for their misery, something that could be summed up preferably in a single phrase. The capitalist system filled the bill. To reinforce the choice of target, knowing how simplistically inaccurate it was, he stated that when Quaid-e-Azam struggled for Pakistan, he aimed at undoing the capitalist system. Nothing could be further from the truth. Barrister Jinnah remained a singularly wealthy, property acquiring capitalist till his last days in India, continuing to purchase valuable property in Bombay and Lahore, almost to the very eve of Pakistan's birth, the subcontinent's partition. Zulfi's argument that Quaid-e-Azam did not want the capitalist system of India to prevail in Pakistan because it was a system being practiced by the Hindus was moreover a total distortion of Jinnah's liberal secularism. Not only did Jinnah fall in love with and marry a Parsi and worked closely with Hindu lawyers, bankers, and other business leaders in Bombay during his mature life, but for several years before partition and the birth of Pakistan, he served as a managing director of Tata Enterprises. He was neither anti-capitalist nor professionally anti-Hindu, though some of his foremost political adversaries were, of course, Hindus. Zulfi, however, wanted to believe that great leader Jinnah would have agreed with him because, as he rightly noted, the Muslims of the subcontinent made innumerable sacrifices during the long and painful struggle for Pakistan. Yet, what had they achieved? What good had it done for the common man, the average Pakistani? You can see that the system, which is a legacy of the British, still prevails. The troubles of the people have increased. We have given you in writing our three principles. you can see that there is no scope for cheating. What made him think about cheating? Those who have cheated you have been exposed. You have to compare their achievements with our performance. That opportunity was still to come.